Good evening and how do you do? One of the disadvantages of having a face made familiar by the television and the film is that when you turn up in what is laughingly known as the flesh, you are never quite what anybody thinks you're going to be. And of course, in my case, I'm very much larger. And they look at me and say, oh, I had no idea you were so big, so tall. And then we go through the usual thing of misidentification. It happens to all of us. But the interesting thing is that the people I get confused with are always tiny. I was coming off the night train from recording Face the Music, which we used to do in Manchester, and I was at Euston Station waiting to be picked up at the gate. And 7:30 a.m. isn't the best time of the day for most of us. And it was grey, and it was winter, and it was cold, and I was standing there, and I noticed a smallish man with red hair in a raincoat, and he went to and fro looking at me and staring, and finally he had the courage to come over and he said, "Are you Cicely Cartnage?" And I had to disappoint him. But one of my favourite misidentifications happened rather more recently, about 3 or 4 years ago. I was walking down the street very near my home in Chelsea, London, borders of Fulham. And there were two men working on a house. And one looked at the other and said loudly, "Oh, there's Dame Sybil." Well, I looked up and I said, "It's not, you know." "No," he said, "no, you're right, it's not. No. No, he said, you're the woman on the music. That's right." Well, he had no idea of my name. I told it to him. He'd never heard of it, but he knew the face. And I was discussing this with Richard Baker because we all have this problem about being taken for someone else. And he, I think to his great credit, has a charming story that he tells against himself. He went into a post office in Wales, and the girl looked at him and she said, "Are you Richard Baker?" And he said, yes, I am. And she let it go just too long before she said, "Oh, I am disappointed." I've been looking back at a long and happy life, full of unsought, unplanned, and unexpected developments. I think that all I ever expected from the very beginning was that things were going to work out all right. I just had that kind of feeling. Euphoria? I don't think so. Pollyanna? I don't think so. No, I think it came from confidence based on an upbringing by parents with an expectation of good. Now, that may sound very sort of solemn, but I think it's true. They had sound values, and they passed them on to me, and rules that they found practical that worked, and I found them too, such as, you may say, well, do unto others if you like. A few years ago, I was in Bath, playing at that lovely little Royal Theatre that smelt of gas, and I passed a friend's meeting house, a Quaker meeting house, and I saw a poster outside it that said something I thought extraordinarily useful. It said, "Friends believe that when you speak to the good in a man, you get right answers." It's not bad. So such ideas have helped me to grow up and to mature with confidence and trust. I think trust is something that seems in short supply today, but on the whole, I found it's been all right. I didn't have any of those crippling worries of fear that there are enemies always just waiting to pounce. I don't believe in luck, but I do believe in recognizing opportunities when they come and being open to them and then having a go. So this is an informal talk, very egotistical, and it's a look at the roots that led me to able to follow a very bold statement that I put in that space that you have in your passport, and I put it in years and years and years ago. I put writer, entertainer in that order. I wasn't a writer except that I wrote what I did in the theatre, but I always had the sort of feeling that the writing was the most important part. Background briefly, mother, American from Virginia. And she was always very, very keen that everybody should know that Virginia was different from anywhere else in the United States because it was settled by the British. And that was a very important point. And my father had an American mother from New England. And in my mother's parlance, she was a damned Yankee in one word. I had a London childhood. I was a townie. And I think, this could account for my passion for nature. Because if you only do it in little concentrated 10-day or 2-week periods, as I did, you can keep the freshness. I dare say if you live in the country the whole time, you get used to the first daisy. I'm not a botanist, but I am a flower finder. And I don't always know what I find, but there are books. I have 2 in the car, always. And I'm not an ornithologist, but I'm a birder. And I do the spotting, and my husband can tell me what I've spotted. So it's quite a good combined effort. I was always aware of the theatre because my parents had a lot of theatrical friends, and I was always caught by the glamour of the theatre. And I said to my father all the way through my adolescence, I want to be an actress. And when I came to analyse it, I wasn't a bit keen on acting. I wanted to be an actress. There was something glamorous about it. It was unworthy. But I did think that there was something very romantic about being an actress. Gertrude Lawrence came to lunch with my mother, smelling deliciously of gardenias. That sort of thing. And Noel Coward was a friend, and Mrs. Patrick Campbell, just a little name-dropping as we go. So I thought that was lovely, that would be something. But I never thought about playing Hedda Gabler or even Bluebell in Fairyland. I just thought it would be nice to be known as an actress. But my father, who was a wise man, he was an architect. And he had a passion for proportion in all things. Stand well back, he said, you can see better. But he insisted that if I was going into the theatre, I must do it seriously. And therefore, I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, for exactly 1 term. I went because I'd been to school in France to learn the language, and there was a French class at RADA, and my father thought it would be a good idea to see if I could consolidate, A, the French, and B, the keenness to be an actress. It didn't really work out terribly well. There was a play in which I played the part of a shepherdess. Celia Johnson played the leading part and became a lifelong friend. And I had a tiny invisible part, but I was given a song to sing. And it was in a key so high that only a dog could have heard it. And I remember I sang it wearing one of those cupcake caps, mob or mop or whatever they're called. I didn't get very far. And then I met Reggie Grenfell, and he took my mind clean off the theatre. And I married him. And this is the year of our golden. So that was nice. I was a very late developer, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Everything that happened in this unsought, unplanned, unexpected career happened after I was 25. And I think that was delightful. It was somehow very nice to have it happen late. It meant that you had a certain sense of values established, so that you realised that to be on the stage wasn't the most important thing in the world, and if you fell flat on your face, it didn't matter that much. So I was always grateful that it happened rather late in life. The first thing I ever did professionally was to write a verse, which appeared in Punch, and I got something like 10 and 6 for it. And then I became a journalist, and I got a job as a radio critic on The Observer, and I eventually got into the theatre. I'm skipping all over that because it's in my book and I've talked about it too often. But my career began in the theatre because of my association with the Women's Institute. And that, I think, does need paying some homage to. We lived in Buckinghamshire, and I belonged to the local institute, and it must have been about this time of the year, or perhaps the beginning of October, when we had a lecture paving the way towards Christmas, and the lecture was on useful and acceptable gifts, or how to make something from nothing. And of course it began, as all Women's Institute lectures do, Madam President, Fellow Institute members, good evening. This evening I'm going to tell you a little bit about my useful and acceptable gifts. And these gifts are not only easy to make, but ever so easy to dispose of. I see several of you ladies have your eye on the boutonniere in my lapel. It is pretty, isn't it? And I'm going to tell you how to make one just like it. First, you must obtain some empty beechnut husk clusters. These are to be found beneath beech trees almost any time from about the middle of September onwards. Cleanse your husks thoroughly and then wire them onto stalks or stems. You will find 6 or 8 are ample for a boutonniere. Now, before you colour, you must decide what flower it is you are making. Mine are wood anemones. Rose without and a deeper rose within. And sometimes I like to use just a suspicion of gold or silver. I like to think that we take nature's gifts and make them even lovelier. It was a result of this particular lecture that supplied a grist to a mill I did not know I had. But I met, in a roundabout way, through meeting Stephen Potter, gamesmanship, lifemanship, I met Bertie Fargen, who was the father of Intimate Review, and at a party, Stephen said, "Do the Women's Institute lecture," which I hadn't given any thought to since the first time I had told him about it on a first meeting. And it was a result of that I got into the theatre. So I've always been very grateful to the Women's Institute. This is the season, isn't it, of country shows. And many, many years later, I wrote a series of sketches called Speeches. They all began, all the different speakers, saying, "I'm not going to make a speech," and then instantly contradicting themselves. And I have to admit that it wasn't 1,000 miles from here that I did attend a show, and I rather enjoyed the last part of the day when the prizes were being given out. And I didn't make it in a Cumberland accent, which unfortunately I'm not really very good at, but I made it in a West Country accent, which is one that I do know just a little bit about. Now, I'm not going to make a speech, but I have been asked to announce the winners of the competitions in the show, so here we go. First prize for baking a plaited loaf, Mrs. Trigmont. For a knitted garment, Mrs. Trigmont. She made beautiful long johns for use on a motorcycle. An arrangement of flowers of the hedgerows in an unusual container. Hers was a sawn-off detergent bottle. Mrs. Trigmont. Dear. And first prize for a homegrown ingredient wine to include veg and flora. And the recipe utilised mangel wurzels, honeysuckle and leeks. Mrs. Trigmont. And finally, a prize for an original household invention using nature's bounty. She used nettles to make toilet paper. Wonderful, Mrs. Trigmont. Well, I do know we all want to congratulate Mrs. Trigmont on a really very remarkable achievement, and we would ask Mr. Trigmont to convey to her all our congratulations and good wishes for a speedy recovery from her total collapse. I get asked, where do the characters that I wrote come from? I haven't the faintest idea. I was always very observant, and in fact, like my mother, we neither of us could learn anything in school because we were so busy watching how the teacher spoke that we couldn't actually hear what she said. And I was totally observant from a very, very early age. I could imitate the way a teacher had little mannerisms or walked or something like that. And I have a feeling that what I was doing all my youth, possibly up to the age of about 15 or 16, was stockpiling, storing observation, and then taking it out and using it. I very, very rarely have used an actual person, though an actual person may have sparked off an idea. When people have come up to me and said, oh, my goodness, I wish you could see my aunt. I can't tell you how killing she is. She's absolutely incredible. I mean, she's so eccentric. She's too extraordinary. And of course, they are much funnier than their aunt. I have been looking back, of course, at my sort of career and the various characters I did, and I realised that all the first monologues I wrote were very much linked with the life I was leading at the time. So in 1939, which is when I went on the stage in April, it was the Women's Institute lecture. Then the war began, and I did something about people working in a canteen. And then I did a sketch called Artist's Room. And this was about people going backstage to see a pianist after a recital. And that was definitely based on my own experience at working at the National Gallery concerts that Myra Hess started during the war. And I had a lovely job. I used to bring in the sandwiches and the refreshments to the artists, and I watched people talking to the pianist about it. And I made 5 or 6 different characters talking. I had a very expensive lady who wasn't very musical. Well, I think it's delicious, you know, but I do think Beethoven goes on so, don't you? Well, I mean, just when you think he's finished, the entire thing starts again. I think I prefer delicious little bits of Debussy. But then, you know, I just like music that you sit back and let it pour over you. I mean, Beethoven doesn't pour, does he? Bless his heart. And then I did 2 ladies on complimentary tickets. Oh, it was nice, wasn't it? It's clever, you know, pianists. Well, I think singing's different. I mean, anybody can sing if they've got the voice. But there's something unusual about the piano. He got quite warm, didn't he? Yes, well, it is warm. You know, I like that Swedish song he played. Well, piece it was, wasn't it, really? Yes, he did. He played a Swedish piece. Well, I saw it. It's in the programme. We'll open it up, dear. Where have you got to, Swedish? Oh, Spanish. Oh, funny, I saw Swedes. Well, we said we'd go and say why Mrs. Hill couldn't use the seats, didn't we? Well, we better go and say. Well, because we promised we would. Hello, thank you so much for the seats. We've come instead of Mrs. Hill. She couldn't come because of her chest. But we thought it was very nice. And, you know, it's made a nice change. It's always nice to get up to London. Any excuse. My favourite in that particular sketch was an unreserved lady in a very top seat at the back. And she used to start at the back of the stage and come down to the footlights. And she just simply said, I'm afraid you don't know who I am, but I just want to say thanks most awfully. Thanks most awfully. I had to learn, of course, about the relationship between an audience and an artist on the stage. I learned a lot about the relationship in a rather curious way. I was invited by Woman's Hour to write an article or a talk, part of a series called The Philosophy of Giving. And I know quite well that they wanted me to be funny about the kind of terrible presents you get, you know, that you look at and you say, yes, it's lovely. What's it for? You know, that kind of thing. But I wasn't in the mood for that. And I thought I would find out a little bit about what I really did think about it. And I made a discovery, which I'm sure you've made yourself, which is that giving and receiving, but not giving and taking, giving and receiving are the same thing. And if that's true in the ordinary sort of way, it's very true between an artist and an audience. I have something I think is funny, I think is moving, I think is interesting, and I offer it to you, but unless you put out your hands to accept it, nothing happens. But when you do accept it, we complete a circle. And that is the whole, it seems to me, the whole relationship with an audience. It's a 50-50, I'll say it again. It's a 50-50 business. And of course you do have to realise that the audience has a total potential. And I remember during the war being told when I was entertaining troops, well, you won't be able to do that to the troops because they won't like it. But I found that if I could start with something fairly basic in the programme and we established some sort of relationship, I could do the most sophisticated material to what were apparently unsophisticated people, and they could enjoy it too, if you can engage imagination and if you can complete the circle. That's my little bit about audiences. I began, of course, by only doing silly women. They were all sort of ninnies, and they were a variety of ninnies and galumphers. But the galumphers were mostly in the movies. You know, those overgrown schoolgirl types in St. Trinian's and The Happiest Days of Your Life. And I realised after I'd written my first book that I hadn't really been quite grateful enough to the movies for making friends for me. Because the movies do go ahead, like gramophone records or radio programmes, and make friends for you in places where you haven't been. But I just have to admit that it was by far the least demanding and far the least stretching part of my career. In a movie, you have to be within a frame, and you have to do what you're told. And I had the privilege of being on the stage and doing what I told. And I was free to invent and play around. But I did enjoy the movies enormously, and I loved very much the feeling of teamwork that you had when you were working on a film, all of you closeted together for 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it was. But even so, it was perhaps the least of the media that I enjoyed the most. Do I say media or mediums? I'm not, well, you know what I mean. It was many, many years before I ever dared do something that wasn't meant to be funny. I was a bit shy about doing something that wasn't meant to be funny, and then I wrote a song called 3 Brothers. This was about an older unmarried sister who had devoted her entire life to her 3 brothers. And she's totally unaware that she's lost anything by it. It's been very fulfilling for her. But I think perhaps it was touching. And the first time I did it, which was in my own solo programme with dancers called Joyce Grenfell Requests the Pleasure, I was astonished to find that it had in fact moved the audience. And you know, there was quite a lot of nose blowing. Very nice. So I got braver and I did a number called Boat Train, about a woman seeing her children off to emigrate. I had been at Waterloo Station with somebody who was in fact emigrating, and her mother had been exactly the opposite. She wasn't brave. She made it very hard for them to go away. And I thought it was a cruel thing. And I wrote the sketch the other way round by somebody saying, and I think I have it here. If I have, I'll read a little bit of it. I half remember everything, but not quite enough. I retired, you know, in 1973. My son and his family are sailing away to start an adventure across the sea. They sold up their house, said goodbye to the neighbours, and all that's left now is their goodbye to me. I think they dread it, you know, standing here in the station. They dread I'll be soppy when I say goodbye. 'Tis a grey sort of morning. I wish they would go now. You know, there's not much to say now except cheery bye. Well, good riddance, I say. I'm glad to be rid of you. Oh, I'll be all right. Don't you worry about me. It's a good job you're going. I'm sick of the sight of you. Oh, I'll be all right. Just think, I'll be free. Just think of the whist drives that I can attend and the programmes on TV. I'll be able to choose. Just think of the leisure and all the pleasure I'll have of my own. Oh, there's no time to lose. No more phoning and saying, Mum, can you come over? Mum, can you get Bill to the dentist, and then can you fetch Jean and the twins from their dancing? Mum, can you and will you? And over again. We've been asked out this evening. Mum, could you come? Again and again. So, good riddance, I say. It's high time I got started. Well, there's so much to do. I'll start now, you'll see. It's a good job you're going. You won't see me gallivanting. Now, listen, I'll be all right. Stop worrying about me. There, the guard's getting ready. Jump in, loves. No, no tears. Mind you write to me often. Take care, my dears. Mind you write to me often. Have a good time. Don't cry. Goodbye, my dear darlings. Bye. Bye. My method of writing monologues was to always, as I say, get the voice, talk it out loud, make notes, and then make a plan and make a script. But with one exception. I don't know about the other women here today, but I don't happen terribly to enjoy from about 1:15 on Saturday till about 6, because there's something called grandstand. So I evacuate the living room and leave it to my husband, who is perfectly happy there. And I usually go up to my workroom, but on one day, I don't know why I didn't bother to go to the workroom. I went into the dining room next door, and I had a pad, and I had a season coming up of, needed a lot of new monologues. And I suddenly thought, I'm going to do something in my mother's Virginia voice. And I'm going to tell myself a story. And I started to think in the way my mother talked. Well, she didn't really, but she could do it very easily because she lived over here quite some time, and she lost her southern accent, but in moments of stress it came straight back. And I wrote a sketch called Lally Tullet. And this, I think I've done it in this theatre. It was an old lady sitting in a rocking chair wearing a white shawl, and she's reading a newspaper. And she looks over and she says to her friend who's sitting there, "Lord have mercy, Charlotte, guess who's dead?" And it reminds her of the whole of a very dramatic incident when she was a bride, a young woman. The sketch was quite strong, and I never changed it. I wrote it down that day in one. It's the only time it's ever happened to me. And I had rather an amusing incident because I went to America and I was going to perform it in Virginia, in the William and Mary University. Well, in England, when I did it, I always announced this sketch, which is called Lally Tullet, takes place in Virginia. But I thought, I don't have the nerve to say that in Virginia. I mean, supposing I don't do it very well, they're going to say, you don't sound very Virginian to me. I better let it sort of ride on its own credit, so to speak. So I just simply sat down, opened up the newspaper, and I've said the first line, "Lord have mercy, Charlotte, guess who's dead?" And they gave me a standing ovation. Afterwards, I met a woman, and she said she'd enjoyed it very much, and she turned to her husband, she said, "John, it was your mother." I began in review, and the war was my training school, my university, my learning time. I was called up as an entertainer, and my assignment was to work in hospital wards and in isolated units where it wasn't practical to send a whole show. And I went with a great friend of mine, no longer alive, Viola Tunnard, and we went to 14 different countries, playing in the most extraordinary places. But that was when I learned about audiences, of course, and their total potential. I've been asked, do I have targets that I mocked or sent up? I don't think consciously, except that I've always thought having no sense of humour is a rather funny thing. You know, people say, I'm afraid I've got a terribly keen sense of humour. It's not always true. Pomposity and false values, of course, and folly. And folly, of course, is something about which we all know. I mean, it's my own folly that I see reflected, and therefore I can use it. But I was never, I don't think, out to destroy the victim. There seemed no point. It was too easy. And I hope I was affectionate about some of them. I get asked whether, when I was touring in America and Canada, whether I had to change the material. And I didn't, but I did have to change the speech rhythms. We talk very fast over here, much faster than we know, I think. And I had to change little things that did rather spoil. I remember I had a sketch, one of my Shirley's Girlfriend sketches, and the line, which I rather liked, was, it was about Mr. Lewis, who she met in the bus queue, used to take her dancing, lovely dancer. lovely. And he's got lovely manners. He says, "May I be permitted to divest you of your plastic Mac?" Well, in America, they don't have plastic Macs. They have plastic raincoats. And of course, it wouldn't have taken very long to twig that a Mac was a raincoat, but it did hold up things, so I had to lose my pleasant clickety sound of plastic Mac and put in plastic raincoat. But in that sketch, there was another thing that rather interested me. I wrote the line, we sat down, we ordered a nice meal, and then he leaned over the table and he took hold of my hand and he says, "Has anyone ever told you you've got provocative eyes?" I see his cuff going the beet salad, but I didn't say much. When I wrote those lines, I put in provocative eyes because I thought that was a funny sound. And I added, "I see his cuff go in the beet salad," for truth. Because I was the kind of person who always noticed, that the cuff did go in the beet salad. And I thought the laugh was going to be on provocative eyes. But of course it wasn't. The laugh is on, "I'll see his cuff go in the beet salad." But I didn't say nothing. So I never knew until I performed the thing where the laughs were going to be. When I was in America, I did the college circuit, and I did a talk the day before the performance, talking to the young about comedy writing, comedy performing, and then of course we started talking about things like censorship and values, and they'd say to me, "Are you shockable?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not a bit shockable, but I am very offendable." And we would go into discussing this. And I do find a very great difference between shock and offence. In shock, you go into a state of shock. You really, you pull down the blinds and you don't take any more notice. But if you're offended, the chances are you take some action. I mean, you may even get up and walk out. And I think it's quite important to be offendable. I was amused when I was talking to students, both in America and over here, about a dictum my father gave me, which I have always found very, very useful, which was about discipline. And he was talking about self-discipline. He said, "Never think of discipline as a thou shalt not. Always think of it as a way through to thou canst." And the students in these various areas were always the ones I talked to were in the arts. They were writers, dancers, painters, musicians, that sort of thing. The musicians and the dancers accepted that dictum instantly because they know you can't play the violin or the piano or dance unless you've got some discipline. But the actors and the writers and the painters weren't at all sure they didn't have to express themselves first. One of the important parts of my life was writing the songs with Richard Addinsell, as I told you. And eventually I wrote songs with William Blezard, who played for me because Dick was ill and had to give up. And then the moment came to retire. Or as it turned out, to change careers, as it were, come off the intercity and go on to the local. Full-time writing, and you can do it at home sitting down. Because, a one-woman show, 2¼ hours, is mostly standing. Certainly all the songs were standing, but I was rather amused again looking back at a list of the monologues I'd written in the last, we'll say, 12 or 15 years, and almost all of them were written to be done sitting down. You get wiser. And so I came to my first book, Joyce Grenfell Requests the Pleasure. It was full of first times, childhood, a very happy childhood. And it was about adolescence and the theatre, and then it was published, and I discovered that you don't just write a book, you become a salesperson, and you travel, and you go out, and you promote. Once upon a time, all you had to do was to live in a very draughty vicarage on the edge of a remote Yorkshire moor and write a bestseller that goes on selling today. Of course, admittedly, you had to have genius, but you never left the village. It's not like that now. But I have enjoyed it enormously because I have a circus horse instinct. And if there's an arena, you might as well use it. And so I have met the public in a way that you never meet in the theatre because there's always a footlight between us. But in a bookshop, people have come up and we've talked to each other. And I've been at it such a long time that they now bring their grandchildren to see the old thing. And that's nice too. The promoting of the book took me to America, where it was published, where it didn't do very well because I'm totally unknown over there, except with a very few people in New York and a couple of friends in California. And I did a talking tour for the English-speaking Union. And as I've already said, my mother came from Virginia and was a Southerner, but I had never been down in the deep South. And boy, that's an experience. Now, we went to an unidentified state down there, and we were looked after by the most charming, and I want to emphasize this, intelligent and amusing woman. But our ideas were a little bit different. She said, first of all, we're going to show you around our town, and you don't have to go to Greece in order to see the Parthenon, because we have an exact replica of the Parthenon right here in town. And she said, and ours has a roof on. I must emphasize that she knew it was funny. But when we came to talking about upstairs, downstairs, I thought perhaps our values were slightly different. When I said to her, did you enjoy it? She said, do you want me to tell you? I said, yeah. She said, I didn't give a damn for downstairs. Now, I have enjoyed looking back, not just for nostalgic reasons, but for re-experiencing the reality of events that happened and were therefore true and last. I've called my second book, from a psalm I rather like, The Lines Are Fallen Unto Me in Pleasant Places, because it so happens the lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. And in the second book, fewer first times, you come onto a sort of plateau, and there's time to look around, and time to assess, and there's time to be more selective, I think. I know one thing, that if I enjoy fewer things, I enjoy them more than I have ever enjoyed them in my life. And I suspect that's because you bring more to each experience as you get older. And I can recommend it. You might ask what? Friendship, for instance. Very much friendship. And flower finding, and making discovery. And you can only discover that which is already in existence to be discovered. And music, of course. And something that happened this summer has given me a sense of pleasure that I don't believe I would have enjoyed nearly so much, say, 25 years ago. We live, as I told you, on the borders of Chelsea and Fulham, and we live in a Victorian house that has been converted into flats. And in our dining room, we have two very tall plate glass windows, and my husband has planted up bamboo sticks, morning glories, those sky blue morning glories, and he's trained them all the way up there. They've crossed over and they come down, so the entire window is framed at this particular moment in the year in blue morning glories. All the trumpets go outwards so the neighbours see them better than we do. But in the morning at breakfast with the light through them, they are absolutely magic. It's a pure pre-Raphaelite picture. Visualise. Here we have our blue morning glories, and in the window box below, a lot of very white geraniums with a clashing red and a petunia pink and another sort of salmon pink. Marvellous. And it's not over yet. On the windowsill inside the dining room are 3 African daisies, a magenta, a mauve and a purple. Got it? Marvellous. In interviews, I'm always asked, which of the media do I prefer working in? Well, there's no question. Live, here, you there, me here. When we make something happen instantly, there's nothing to top that. Television has a sort of intimate quality, and it's fun because you know you're entertaining people quietly in their own homes, or you hope you are, maybe in bars, who knows. And there are films, as I say, a bit limiting, but I'm grateful for them. But to write for, radio. Radio. Because why? Because it's the most imaginative. The story of the twins asked why one liked television and one liked radio. And she said because on radio she saw the pictures more clearly. I agree. So I would like to play my radio game with you now. Now, I would like you to look and establish that here I am, a large lady of uncertain years, in a dress that oughtn't to be sticking to the... Well, it was supposed to be non-static, but I must do something about it. And I would like to try and suggest to you that I am several entirely different kind of characters. But in order for this to work, you have to close your eyes. And I know people cheat, but you won't get nearly as much satisfaction. It won't work as well unless you do, in fact, close your eyes. Now, we will start. The very first one, delicious water you have up here, is a period piece. We're at a literary party at least 25 years ago. Now, I hope your eyes are shut.
I feel as if I'd known you for absolute ages instead of only half an hour. It was frightfully clever of you to find this lovely quiet place, even though it is a bit dark. Of course, I do know all about your books, and when Alison said, do come in on Friday, because he's coming, I almost died. Yes, I almost died. Well, I have. I've read all your books. No, I haven't got them, but I got them out of the library. No, they didn't have them, they got them for me. I think it's marvellous the way you have such original backgrounds in your books. I'd no idea Edinburgh was like that. Yes, I have been through it on the way to places, but I say, you know that book you wrote about Istanbul? You know, remember that man you had in it? I think it's called, isn't it called Sin is a Fair Flower? Well, you know, you made him so harsh, didn't you, and so evil, and so cruel to his wife, I mean, branding her and everything. And yet all the time, deep down, he was frightfully religious. I was awfully surprised when he became a nun. I mean a monk.
Number 2. Is this not a smashing cocktail party? I am so fond for cocktail party. I think it's so nice to have little things for eating. It's so gay. Yes, we are here in London with my husband. My husband is having business associate here in London. So we are coming to London, and we are coming to New York, to Amsterdam, and to Dublin, and Buenos Aires, all over. And everywhere there is always a cocktail party. You are knowing Lady Hetting? She is a tall, thin English lady, and she is most kind for me. We are making a sightsee for London. Oh, well, we are seeing Westminster Abbey, and we go to the zoo, and we are going to Marks and Spencer, and we are going with Lady Hetting to see the Ideal Homes exhibition. Lady Hetting is good for cooking, and I am bringing her from my country a little gift horse. It is a little chipple chopper. Oh, a chipple chopper. This is a little gadget knife for cutting up celery. I think she will find him most useless. You are from London. Oh, you are from Cardiff. Oh, that is nice. I was once in Scotland. Number 3. We're in the folk song world. I would I were a sunbeam, a glancing on your face, a making little speckly freckly marks all over the place. I would I were a stocking, a clinging to your foot, making little prickly tickly toes inside of your boot. Number 4. My name is Marty Winderhow, and I'm a music student from the United States of America, and I'm here on a traveling fellowship to write a thesis on the sonata form, and I was very well pleased to obtain a free pass to your recital this afternoon, and I like the way you exposed the contours of the Prokofiev sonata you let us hear. Although you know your interpretation does conflict somewhat with interpretations I have familiarized myself with on disc, but I think it was valid, although I would like to discuss with you sometime the premise from which you tangentized your explorations. They were quite cogent, but I found my emotions were only semi-engaged by your display of pyrotechnics, but I would like to very much appreciate sitting in on one of your study sessions with you, and I can be reached at this address. I've written it on a little bit of paper here for you, and I look forward to hearing from you. Listen, I mustn't keep you from your other friends. It's been lovely knowing you. Have a happy day. And finally, number 5, we are in a very small kitchen cum living room.
It's ever so nice to you to come around and tell me about the outing, but I don't think I'm going to bother this year. Where's it to? I've been there. No, well, it's the sea, you see, and it's all the same, the sea, so I shan't bother. Well, I don't mind being on my own, No, I get used to it. Well, you've got no choice, have you? Well, I had a sister. And I had a brother, but they're gone now a long time. I got a niece. Well, I got her address someplace. I'll put it away safe. I think she's in Canada, but it could be New Zealand. It's one of them places. But she don't write, I don't write, and there you are. Yes, it is a nice little room, isn't it? Yes, I like it very well. And I have a lovely home help. A nice young woman, she comes in here, she does me out lovely. She pulls the bed out, and she gets all the fluff up from under it. There's always a lot of fluff under my bed. We don't know how it gets there. She says to me, "Oh, yeah, made a lot of fluff this week." Oh, we have a good laugh. Yes, she's very nice. Yes, it is a nice room, and yes, it keeps nice and warm. Well, I tell you what I do. I don't think you meant to, but I light the oven and I leave the door open. I don't think you meant to. And I've got a cold tap, the use of it, halfway down the stairs. And then the other thing is all the way down the stairs and, just across the yard. Yes, it is. It's nice and convenient. And I tell you something. If you was to open this window and lean well out, you could see the back of Woolworths. I like to know what's going on there. Well, it's nice of you to come round, and thank you, but I shan't bother with the outing. But thanks all the same. You may look now.
The other regular question, of course, interviewers always ask, which is your favourite character? And I'd like to do them in reverse order, like they do Miss World. Number 3 would be the nursery school teacher. But I just have to put her number 3, and I'll tell you for why. She isn't a very interesting woman, is she? But I'm very grateful to her because she's made friends for me as no other character has ever done. And I'm very, very grateful to her for that. But she isn't a terribly interesting character, though she has done me one rather splendid service, I think. They use my nursery school sketches in the training schools to teach people how not to do it. You could hardly be more complimented, could you? In the middle, number 2, is a character I wrote called Mrs. Moss. And she's the one who won the rabbit in the raffle. And I am very fond of her because, if you remember, she wins a prize. And she gets a bit worried about taking these tickets in case she wins, because the first prize is a cruise for 2 to Madeira. There and back. And you see, she's a bit worried in case she wins because they could make you go, couldn't they? Well, I mean, you don't know where you are with them, do you? And the whole thing is about this and the rabbit and everything. Well, she wins a rabbit, and she doesn't want a rabbit. I mean, what am I going to do with a rabbit? Well, because you see, you have to do a rabbit. No, I have never actually done a rabbit, but I've seen many a rabbit done. I mean, if my mother had done a rabbit once, she'd done it 12 times. And you'd be surprised what goes on under all that fur. So, she has a bad time, and she thinks of the things. I couldn't drop it on the bus. Well, I mean, some nosy park would say, oh, look, you left your rabbit on the bus. And I couldn't put it in my dustbin, because they cleared it that morning. And you know what they are, I mean, just once a week, if that, because they please themselves. And in the end, she posts it through the window of a mini car. But there's a tiny footnote to that one, which is that after I'd done that on television and said that about the dustman, they please themselves, I mean, it's like that. I mean, they may take it, they may not. The dustman came round to our flat and they said to the porter, where's Joyce Grenfell live? And they said, in that block. We're not going to take her rubbish. They were serious. But the joy was, of course, the rubbish is communal rubbish by the time they get it, so my rubbish went. My favourite of all characters is the wife of the Vice-Chancellor of an Oxbridge University. And she is the character I most enjoyed doing and I most enjoyed writing. The way she used her sentences was based on a real person. And she had this marvellous way of using sentences, and I wrote about it in my first book. For instance, when I did a money raiser for her in aid of the Save the Children Fund or whatever it was, she used to pay my expenses. And she would say to me the night after the concert, my dear Joyce, we have not yet touched on the sordid topic of coin. And I loved all that way of so I invented this character. She assumed you were as intelligent and as well-read as she was. And of course it was not at all the case. But she treated you as a total equal, which I thought was very charming. And when my first book came out, I was sent a young man to interview me for one of the Sunday papers, and poor fella, he hadn't actually read the book. And I couldn't help telling him. I said, I've done this already in a monologue, and it goes like this, where she says to, well, Mr. Wimble, it's so nice of you to ask me to come on to your television program in order to discuss my book. I don't know, have you actually read it? No, I know it's so very difficult to find time to read what one really wants to, but I just thought you might possibly have, so that we could discuss it. She is my favourite. No question about it, she is my favourite. Well, now, while I was working on the second book, I wondered which of the many first times that have happened to me that have been so exciting is the one that I have enjoyed the most, apart from meeting my husband, we'll say. Was it the first time I appeared in print, the poem in Punch? Was it the first time I appeared in a column on The Observer? Was it the first time on the stage, television studio, gramophone studio, film, etc.? No. It was the moment when I held in my hand the hardback copy of my first book. That was something undreamed about, unexpected, unsought, unplanned, and absolutely thrilling. One of the songs that Richard Adamsell and I wrote together was a song about time. And it began by saying, when I was a girl, there was always time. When I was a young woman, there was always time. When I was an elderly woman, there's no more time. And it ended, but now I'm an old, old woman, so I want the last word. There is no such thing as time. Only this very minute. And I'm in it. Thank the Lord.